Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Zoom at 8. My name is Julianne Peterson, and I am your host tonight, as well as every Tuesday night. We are here for Zoom at 8. As well, I am a loan officer, a senior director at Old Capital. Now, there's only about 10 of us. We close about 8,000 loans so far and about $1.2 billion a year in loans. Now, we haven't been so great this last couple of years because it's been challenging. As you may know, commercial real estate has taken a little bit of a downturn over the last couple of years, but we are starting to see it picking up. And many of you are starting to see deals that might work, or there's a little glimmer of hope when it comes to equity. So you want to get in now. This is like the first inning. Okay, the folks that got in 21, they are now out of the game. A lot of people have gone, they capital raised, and those deals have not gone well. So you're in it at a right time. This is creating generational wealth right now. So being prepared, getting to know who your partners are, understanding how to underwrite these deals, the time is now. So you're in the right place. Of course, if you're looking for a lender, I would love to be your lender of choice. So we can take a look at your deal before you put in an LOI. So don't be putting in a bunch of offers because you could be putting in the wrong price. And then you look foolish. Again, it is so important that you set your relationships now with these brokers. They are hungry, but they're not going to be hungry for very long. So if you set the tone and the table with them today where you're failing them, they're going to remember that. So really look at putting your offer in after you hit me. Okay. You're going to want to talk to the insurance broker. You want to talk to a property manager and the tax authority. Go to the assessor's office. Get the information you need. Make sure that when you plug in those numbers, the returns for your investors are strong or strong enough that they will consider this an opportunity to invest in. Then once you have that, come over to Julie at Old Capital, and I'm going to need your T12 rent roll, the offering memorandum, if there is one, and your underwriting. And we will look at it in 48 hours. We will provide you our underwriting and a quote, most likely a quote, unless we've got a bunch of questions. Those questions you're going to go ask the broker. Is the R&M, do we have some CapEx that needs to be pulled out and put down below the line? So you're going to start to ask these questions, but ultimately you're going to put our underwriting into your model and see if the returns work. And if they do, that's the time to go ahead and put in an LOI. Okay. If it isn't, I would still reach out to that broker and say, hey, I'm coming up with something much lower. Can I offer you feedback? They are anxious to get feedback to go back to these sellers. Now, I would tell you that we're seeing a lot of modifications right now, especially on the bridge loans. Lenders don't want to take them. They don't want to be owners. They don't want to take that property back. So while there are a lot of opportunities out there, there is this undercurrent that says, I might get a modification on my loan, and therefore we're not going to sell. I see that quite often, actually. So Mark Gross is in the house, and I will let him introduce himself because he does such a great job. I got to tell you, Mark has been nearly at all of the Zoom at 8 since we started. So this has helped me grow my business. Hopefully Zoom at 8 has helped him grow his business, and it is a great partnership. He also comes to our Old Capital conference. So Mark Gross is important to me. He's special to me. He lives in the town that I lived in. So we have a lot of commonality, and therefore I want to support him, and he obviously wants to support me. So I want everybody to give him a round of our attention here. If you would go up to the right side of your screen, there's a view. It has 9 little dots. look at the speaker view and then you'll see me, and we will turn it over here to Mark Gross. Mark, welcome to Zoom at 8. How you doing tonight?
Well, thank you. I'm doing very well. Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity. And you're right, it has been a few years since the last presentation, but I'm looking forward to speaking again. This is fun.
Yeah, it is. You help me so much and help our listeners help uh, get them to understand what is cost segregation. And this is really where all of the magic happens, especially for investors. So I'm excited. Would you like me to share now your presentation?
Yeah, well, let me go ahead and do that. Yes, thank you.
Okay. All right. You should be ready to roll.
Okay, that just has my contact information. I put that in the chat as well, so we can move on to the next one. And I like to make this interactive as well. If people have questions or comments, I mean, let's talk and open up about that. I like to get some feedback from people. Why do people invest in real estate? What are some of the reasons?
Should we put
Go
that
ahead.
in the chat or should we just open it up for discussion?
However you want to do it. I mean, what about yourself? Why would you like to invest in real estate? There we go.
I
Real estate
invest because
appreciation.
I want to have passive income. I want to at some point stop working and just have my real estate income come in and I can go and do my thing. But I
Okay.
really do love real estate, so I don't know if I'll ever retire.
Well, I've seen some comments in there about tax savings and appreciation and passive income. So those are all good reasons. And grow your wealth. Okay, appreciate that one. You can go on to the next page, which is it advantageous to quote unquote lose money in real estate? And that's what we're going to be talking about here. Not actually losing money out of your pocket, but there's a way for you to reduce your tax liability. So, or increase your tax liability, or reduce it rather. I'm sorry. Go on to the next page, and what we'll see here is a comment from one of the senators that indicated that the tax loophole is something that benefits the other guy, that benefits you is tax reform. So, what we're going to be talking about here is all in the IRS tax code. We're not making this stuff up. We've been doing this for over 20 years. We've done over 45,000 studies over the years. We've never had a study trigger an audit. We've had clients audited for other reasons, and we have successfully defended every one. Why? Is because we do everything by the book. It's all based on IRS guidelines. So we're not making this stuff up. So let's move on. So what is cost segregation? Um, what we do with our studies is identify what are the components within a property that can be reclassified. So when you think about it, if you were not to do cost segregation, what a CPA will do is take a look at the purchase price. And let's say the purchase price is 1.2 million. And let's say that the land is $200,000. Land cannot be depreciated. So what a CPA would do is take a look at the purchase price, subtract the land, and you have $1 million left. That would be straight line depreciated over a number of years. Now, it's for most property types, it would be straight line depreciated over 39 years. However, for residential properties, it's 27 and a half years. So that would be the normal way of doing your depreciation. And you can see there it indicates the difference there, the 27 and a half and the 39 years. And with a cost segregation study, what it does is identify what are the components within the property that you can depreciate faster. And we'll get into some examples of that here in a little bit. But one thing that it will indicate here is we can roughly save maybe $30,000 to $80,000 per $1 million in cash flow over the years. And as far as the size of properties, we can go as low as maybe $350,000, $200,000. Most of mine are in the millions of dollars. Recently did one for over $60 million. So, and I actually got yesterday was talking to someone who's acquiring a property for about $55 million in multifamily. So it's all over the map as far as the different size projects that we've done.
So I'm just going to jump in here for just a minute. So when you take over a property and you haven't started a cost segregation, let's say you just bought it in October. For this year, 24, you could do a cost seg on the property itself, right?
Correct.
And then next year, you start to do some of the tenant improvements, right? And you have a CapEx budget. You can go back in and do a second cost seg. Can you confirm that?
Yes, what we do is, and I actually ask that information up front because what I like to do is bundle it together if possible, and that is to ask what is your CapEx expectation going to be? Because what we'll do is be able to give you an estimate of what your tax savings would be for that as well. So let's say you're going to spend, $300,000 or whatever it is. Give us a rough idea as far as what you're going to be spending it on. And based on that, we'll do a preliminary analysis to not only show you what their savings are for your acquisition, but also for the CapEx. It's something which is called a PAD, or a partial asset disposition, and gets a little technical, but that's what it's called, and we'll address that a little bit later here as well. But that's a good point, and we have a lot of clients that do that for not just especially with multifamily. Maybe you're converting from a Class C to a Class B or something like that. That's a good example of when that might work.
Yep.
So we can go on to the next one. For
Pass this
those of
one.
you, yeah, for those of you who may remember the old McDonald's commercial, do you remember this one, Julianne?
I do. Oh, please, no, I can't remember
You're
all
not
of
going to
it.
sing. You're
All
not going to sing.
special,
You're not going to sing it for us.
all beef patty, special sauce, lettuce, cheese, pickles, onions on a sesame seed bun. Thank you. I'm
Very
glad you put
good.
that on there. Thank you.
Good job. Well,
Do you
well, again,
remember
we're talking
Burger King's
about the
answer?
straight line method, and we're talking about the cost segregation method. People talk about the straight line method. It's basically just a building, or it's just a hamburger, if you use that analogy. But when you look at the cost segregation method, it's not going to look at the building as just a building. It's going to take a look at all the different parts and pieces. So you can see the different parts and pieces of a hamburger. Well, in a property, it's going to be, well, what's the carpeting? What's the parking lot? What's the molding? What's the lighting? There's a whole lot of different components that we'll identify through the cost segregation method. Okay, we can move on. And this will give you an example here. You can take a look at, okay, let me ask this question. Who can remember what the 39 versus the 27.5 year is? See that in the top bucket?
Commercial and residential.
Correct. 39 is for most property types, and the 27.5 is residential. And that could be for a single family long-term rental, and it could be for a large multifamily. And let me ask you a trick question. What's an Airbnb?
Short-term rental.
Is that residential, or is that going to be commercial? Airbnb is treated like a commercial, just like a hotel, because it doesn't have a long-term lease on it. So we've actually run across a lot of CPAs who get it wrong. And so that's just a little extra thing for you to learn today. So what you can see here is that there's going to be certain components. Look at the base building. Look at this picture here, where you see the base building for 39 years and 27.5. There's going to be certain components within that property which cannot be depreciated. You have your structural parts of the building, which still are going to have to be straight line depreciated over the 39 years or the 27.5 years. But what our study will do is, first of all, you can see there the land. You can't depreciate the land, or in this particular case, this would be the development of it. Another trick question here: what property type do you think probably has one of the largest amounts of depreciation and tax savings? What property type? Any guesses?
Industrial?
No, usually the industrial is not as much, and the reason why is because It really, in those particular cases, we ask what's the percentage of the industrial area? It could be the distribution, warehouse, manufacturing versus the office. From a square footage perspective, you're going to get a lot more from the office area because think of all the componentry within an office area as opposed to the large industrial space. But actually, the one where we get the most out of it, and it kind of surprised me at first, were mobile home parks. And the reason why is because you have all that infrastructure that's in there that can be taken a look at and appreciated. So
Let me
that's
ask
one.
you a question on that. So what if the park does not own those though? They're not park owned homes. It's
Yeah,
just the
we're
infrastructure.
looking at the land improvements that are within the property.
Okay.
Because we'll ask all those different questions. But you're right, there can be distinction between that. Okay, let's
What
move on
about
to.
commercial, like, strip malls, mechanic shops, car washes, stuff like that? What does that play into that?
Yeah, that works quite well too. What I'm doing right now is a Walgreens store, retail store, or some shopping centers. One story I like to tell is last year I had one client who had 6 or 7 strip malls in the Chicagoland area, and I saved him over $2.5 million on his taxes with those.
I
So
hope he bought you a Big Mac with that.
well, he's come back with some more projects, that's for sure. this this year, but it's pretty good. And what this page right here is nice because it shows you what the breakdown is between the real property, personal property, um, and land improvements and things of that nature. So you have your landscaping, your pole lights, and I'm not going to read all the different things, but this will give you an example of what our study will do. Um, when we do a site visit, we'll go out to the property, we'll take hundreds of photographs, and then with that information, what our engineers will do is review all that information, also take a look at any blueprints and surveys, the offering memorandum and appraisal, all the different documents that are available, closing documents. And based on that, they'll go ahead and identify what's the maximum amount of items that can be depreciated. And a lot of times it has to do with like for instance for lighting, how is it affixed to the ceiling? If it's affixed in a certain way, it can be depreciated. If it's affixed in another way, it can't be. So it's a very extensive analysis, which is why it takes weeks for the engineers to go through and complete the studies.
And do you take into consideration appraisers, how much they're valuing that lighting, or is that based on the value,
We,
if it was brand new? How do you do that?
we have a database of all the different costs. For instance, what they'll do is they'll even zoom in on what's the security camera and what's the model of that and what's the cost of that's going to be. So it's very extensive um, for all the different variables.
This is a great sheet. You guys should take a picture. I will be including this in the Friday recap, but if you're not looking at that, this is great and something to be talking to your investors about how this gets done, what they look for, and how they depreciate.
Yep. Okay, let's go on to the next one. This is just kind of another detail here, which will show you some of the, rather than the buckets, it'll just kind of give you a descriptive of all the different elements. We can move on. And what I like about this screen is that this will give you a visual representation of what a straight line depreciation is versus your cost segregation. When you take a look at your green line there, that's your straight line depreciation. You can see it's pretty well, it's straight. If you take a look at accelerated depreciation and think back a little bit before we had bonus depreciation, when we did a cost segregation study, it would just be breaking things up into, let's say, 5-year components, such as your carpeting and things of that nature. And your 15-year would be your parking lot and things like that. So that would be your red line. But then there's something called bonus depreciation, and what that did, and it's no longer 100%. However, we think 100% is probably going to be coming back, and that is you can take that portion of anything which has a less than 20-year life and depreciate it 100% the first year. Now, that all came about as part of the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act at the end of 2017. And for a few years, it was 100%. Then it went down to 80% last year, 60% this year, and is scheduled to go to 40% in 25. However, we feel, especially with the results of the last election, is probably going to come back to 100% because there's been a lot of talk about that. And what's in question now is it possibly going to make some of the previous acquisitions in 24 and 23 retroactive to 100%? That we don't know. We actually don't know for sure that it'll go to 100% next year, but we'll just have to wait and see on that one. Okay. What type of properties? What's interesting is you talked to Julianne about the industrial properties. I did one here in Elk Grove Village, this site visit a couple of weeks ago. Another one I did a few years ago was in Bedford Park. It was a printing facility that printed up all the sale papers that you get on a Wednesday from all the grocery stores. So that was an interesting one. I've done virtually all these different property types. If I don't do it, if it's in the Chicagoland area, I'll do it personally. But otherwise, we have boots on the ground nationwide to do these studies. Recently, I did 4 Airbnb properties in Kauai, Hawaii. Again, I didn't go there personally, but that was fun. Now, what's interesting about that particular one, and one thing I talked about, what is, when you take a look at the purchase price, what is it that you can't depreciate? And that is the land. Now, what's interesting is if you happen to have a condo, or like, let's say I did a land lease on a Walgreens in Florida, what was interesting about that is that we could do the depreciation off the acquisition cost, because for a land lease, you don't own the land. So therefore, you didn't have to subtract that. Also, based on some condo associations, some of them say you own a percentage of the land, some of them say you don't. So the ones that I did in Kauai, Hawaii, those particular ones did not have any lands need to be subtracted, because based on the condo association rules, that wasn't required. Talk about restaurants. I'll tell you, I did one here recently in Niles, Illinois, and that one saved the guy, I think, over $1 million. He did a very extensive renovation on it, so that one turned out really well. Medical facilities are really good because you have a lot of interior walls and a lot of the space like that. So your warehouses would probably be the ones with the less amount. However, when you take a look at your return on investment, you're still going to get a very good return regardless of what it is. Now, one thing to take in consideration is it's most advantageous to do your cost segregation first year of acquisition. However, that doesn't mean that if you don't do it the first year, you haven't missed the boat. If you owned it for 15, 20 years, then so much of the property's been straight line depreciated that it's not worth going back and doing it. But let's say it's only been a few years, you can go ahead and do that. There is an extra hoop you got to jump through. There's something called the Form 3115. You don't have to amend your previous year taxes, but what that does is that it tells the IRS that I used to do straight line depreciation, but now I do accelerated depreciation. And again, you don't have to amend your taxes, but we can provide that if your CPA is not well versed in doing real estate, but we do that frequently for people. In fact, what's interesting right now, we talked about how bonus depreciation has been reduced. If you acquired a property a few years ago when there was still 100% depreciation and you didn't do it, the cost seg, then you can still do that now and get 100%. So that's something that I've been helping some clients with here recently as well.
I have a question. A lot of people want to buy LLCs. They don't want to pay the tax consequences of a purchase, and they buy the LLC. That first, at this point, would have been the seller to the buyer did a cost segregation. Does that take advantage, and you can't then take the new buyers who bought the LLC? Do they get to take advantage of the cost seg?
Do they
That's a
have
stumper.
the same? Do they have the same owner? Any of the owners the same, or are they all new?
No, all new. But it's still under ABC LLC that the previous seller owned.
You know, I actually haven't run across that particular scenario. I would think that that they could probably do it because it's the ownership structure. If it was a situation where I've seen some whereby it's some of the owners will drop out and the other owners will do it, and that's a different scenario. So that particular one, I am not 100% sure I would run that up the flagpole and get a response rate.
Okay.
Can I ask another question about land really quick?
Yeah.
How does it work when you have water rights and or mineral rights? And the mineral rights would essentially be if you're having somebody like excavate the property to dig up the minerals on it, or does oil fit into that? And how does that work in that?
You know, we really don't get into that part of it. It's primarily for the building structure itself and for maybe the land improvements that are there, not any of the mineral parts of it.
Okay.
But one thing I will mention, if you look at the lower right here, you'll see something which will say leasehold improvements. We have some clients that may not necessarily own the property. Let's say in a retail setting, what frequently occurs is that the landlord will pay for the TI or the tenant improvements. However, if you have a situation where the tenant's actually paying for it, then we can do a cost segregation for the tenant for the leasehold. However, if the landlord's paying for it, the tenant cannot do it because it's based on who's going to be paying for it. It's the same. Let's say you have a situation where you have a large insurance claim, and the insurance paid out for something. If you were to go ahead and repair that, you can't do a cost segregation on that CapEx part of it because it didn't come out of your pocket. Your insurance company paid for it. So that's one of the distinctions for that one. Okay, move ahead. So what we basically do is create a lot of cash flow in the first years. And again, I want to reiterate the fact that prior to the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, we were able to do a lot of cost segregation by just depreciating over 5 years or 15 years, which is still better than doing it over your 27 and a half and 39 years. But again, bonus just kind of put cost segregation on steroids. And again, what I mentioned at the very beginning was this is all compliant with the tax code. And another interesting fact here is who can benefit from this. If you happen to be a real estate professional, or you have a spouse who's a real estate professional, the deductions can actually go against not just the income from the property, but also against your W-2 income. So
let's unpack that just a little bit. Now, those of you who are real estate professionals, I'm a real estate professional. Any K1 that I receive, K1 is going to take into consideration all of the cost seg. That's going to go against my earnings on my 1099, not my husband's W-2. That's why you want to be looking at, if you're a spouse and maybe you do real estate as an investor, being an investor, you would want to make sure that you take the REPS, which is the real estate professional designation on your taxes. Now, there are some qualifications, but if you're doing that on a full-time basis, you qualify 750 hours. But at the end of the day, you really want to take advantage of it because this is the cost segregation. Like we work with a lot of doctors doctors have a lot of income, their wife stays at home and shops, right? It would be advantageous for the wife to be a real estate professional. She doesn't have to have a qualification at all. She's just managing their investments, putting money in as general partners and as limited partners. All of that, all of her money that she gets out of those investments will have a tax deduction for her, and it'll offset his income as well. But that goes kind of on the shelf. Is that kind of how, did I say
Yeah,
that right?
and the key there is to make sure that the rep is going to document what their hours are and all that information, because if they ever get audited, you need to have the substantiation to be able to support the fact that you do qualify for that you do put in the hours. I mean, there's been a number of people that have claimed that, but they have a W-2 working 40 hours a week, and the IRS is like scratches their head and said, and how are you doing that? And there's not enough hours in the day. So make sure that you document it. And to your earlier point there regarding, I have a high income neurosurgeon that I was working with doing studies for, and he said, oh, of course, the conversation, oh, by the way, my wife is a real estate professional. So so
There
he
you go.
got it.
Yeah, good point.
Okay, let's move on. This is just a couple other examples of some of the studies that we've done. We discussed, it really works for all property types, but this will give you a few examples of some we've done.
So again, now these people are buying them. They're having this conversation either before they buy it or quickly after to get a sense of what is the tax benefits based on a cost seg. You're going to have those conversations. When should somebody contact you? When is the optimal time?
That's a great question. It really depends on what's the time of the year and when they're planning on closing. I actually talking to someone this week who's buying something, but they're not going to close on it until May. And that's unusual, but what they're looking for is what's the estimate of what the savings are going to be for that. But let's say someone is closing on something right now in December. You want to do it right away. If you're not planning on extending your taxes, if you want to have those taxes, done in March and April, you really should do it right away. If you're planning on extending it into the fall, then you have some time. But let's say you acquire something in January, there's really no rush to go ahead and do it, because it's all based on what the time is. However, one thing to take into consideration is that with the results of the cost segregation study, your CPA may be able to take a look at those quote unquote losses and adjust your quarterly taxes. So it's not just taken into consideration for your taxes when you file, but also for your quarterly tax payments. Did that answer your question?
Yep, that's right.
Okay.
So let's look at this dental office. They purchased in 2008 for $1 million. It was just a shell. Then they built out the different offices and had the improvements, spent $450,000. That was on this business office, this dental office. Did you do the cost seg in 2009, or did you just do those now because you have improved the property?
That was one where they acquired and then did the improvements right away,
Okay.
because they needed to have the improvements in order to be operational. And
Okay.
and actually the results aren't as high now because as what they would be now, because take a look at what year that was done.
Yeah,
That was
that's what I was
before
gonna
you had
say.
your bonus depreciation. But that brings up an interesting point as far as when can you do a study. And I had some people contact me recently. They want to get a quote on something, and I asked, well, when did it go into service? And they said, well, it's vacant. I said, well, you can't do something on a property if it's not in service, or it's eligible to be in service. Maybe it's at the end of December and you've done a lot of capex and you don't actually have a renter in there yet. However, you're advertising for it. It's available to be rented. You can claim it in that calendar year. But if it's something that's not going to be in service, you can't do it. So that's why I've had people contact me. Well, we're doing new construction right now. What stage is that? Well, we're still working on it. Well, I can't help you with that right now, unless we get into that other thing down the road as far as the green zip tape, Julie. We can talk about that later.
Okay. So just so everybody knows, if on the self-storage, you save them 45,000, that's on net cash flow? Or that's after the
That would be
debt service?
on their taxes. Let's say they owed 50,000 in taxes, then they would, instead of owing 50, it'd be 5.
Got it. Right.
Yeah, in fact, I just delivered a study today for self-storage in Florida for a client. So our estimate, what we do is we provide a free preliminary analysis. What happens is a client will fill out a questionnaire, and based on that information, our analysts will take a look at it based on the tens of thousands of studies that we've done. Within 2 business days, we'll come back with what's the estimate, and we'll provide a range. This is the conservative, and this is a more high-end estimate of what it's going to be. And in this particular case, the one I delivered today, our estimate was somewhere in the range of $75,000 to $80,000, what we estimated, and it ended up being over 90,000. So sometimes, our actual results are higher than what we estimate. Our preference is to under promise and over deliver on what the savings would be. Not your most attractive building here, but what's interesting about,
we don't judge.
Yeah. What's interesting about this one is that, and you can't see it in the picture, it had a huge parking lot. Now, parking lot is considered to be a 15-year property, and with bonus depreciation, you can take the lion's share of that in the first year. So it's not all based on the most attractive building. In fact, sometimes some people will ask me, well, how much is the savings going to be on a $20 million multifamily? Well, the answer is it depends. I mean, I worked on some which are like that, which are in Kansas, and they're all, 1 to 2 stories spread over a number of acres. You might have another which is in the inner city, and it has 0 parking, and it's all just one structure. Now your results on each of those are going to be different. So again, the answer is it depends, which is why we ask a lot of those preliminary questions up front. So we want to be able to provide our clients with as accurate as possible estimate of what the savings are going to be. Okay, let's move on. So what type of information do we ask for? We ask, what type of building is it in service? What's the address? We ask all those type of information about it. What's the tax rate? Is it part of a 1031 exchange? We can still do it if it's a 1031 exchange. It's just that we need to get information about the property that was being sold, so we can take a look at what the cost basis is going to be for that. Now, there's some situations where one of the other pre-qualifying questions we ask is, what's your hold period going to be? We ask if you're going to be holding it for at least 5 years or longer. There's something called a recapture tax. And what we don't want to do a study for someone if they're going to do a quick flip on something, because we want to make sure that you get enough return on investment on the savings you're going to have, which is going to far outweigh whatever the recapture tax might be. And typically that's within a 3 to 5 year period of time. I've had some clients that say, you know what, I know all about recapture tax, and I'm going to sell it in 2 years, but I still want to do it because I know that the return on investment I'm going to get on the savings is going to far outweigh whatever the recapture tax is. As long as they're cognizant of that and they understand what it is, that's fine, but we want people to be informed about making that decision.
So I'm going to throw this out. Maybe you can clarify it. There's a lot of bridge loans that have gone south, a lot of modifications. People took those depreciations the first year, and now they're going to lose it. What they're going to have to do a recapture on that if it goes back or they lose it? Is that
a pretty picture?
Okay. So I think it's really important everybody understand, if you're in a deal as a limited partner, and if Charles is still here, I can't tell who's still here, but we do a lot of trying to save people taxes, but when a deal goes haywire, which a lot of people in the room may be subject to a great tax deduction 1 year, and now you're going to lose that money that you put in, 100,000. You're going to have to pay taxes on that money that you wrote off as the recapture. So be very careful and have conversations with your CPAs.
Yeah, another thing too is that a lot of my clients are into generational wealth. What they want to do is provide, generational wealth for their next generations. And what's interesting with that is it's a little morbid, but with their exit strategy is that they pass away because there's something called a no step up in basis. So there would be no recapture tax in a situation like that. So that's what a lot of clients do.
Okay.
One thing we addressed earlier was the PAD, or partial asset disposition. What we'll do for our clients is not just the analysis on the acquisition, but we talked about, for instance, a multifamily where someone is going to be converting from a C to a B, and things of that nature. We'll do the separate study on that. In addition to the cost segregation, we also do research and development tax credits. A lot of software companies, manufacturing companies, a lot of companies that are doing R&D type of work, we can do analysis on that. We also do what's called the 179D energy tax credits for LED lights and things of that nature. And we also do something which is called green zip tape. That has to do with the tape that we have, and that might be a good segue to get into that video, huh?
You got it. Here we go. Turn up your music. Let's see. Here we go.
Let's make this simple. What is green zip and how does it work? Green zip is a patented tape that transforms your interior walls into demountable and reusable drywall partitions. Stop. Back up. Did you catch that? Demountable and reusable drywall partitions. What if construction was that simple? Just back up, redo. Back up, redo, back up, redo. Well, that's just what green zip does. What if you needed to get behind the walls or reconfigure a build-out? Up until now, the only way to do this is by demolition. You can't undo that, and you can't reuse the materials. Green Zip revolutionizes the construction process because it allows you to reverse the construction process without demolition, which means you can remove, reuse, and relocate those same components, which saves you money. In short, Green Zip is the smart way to build. It's also easy. Apply by zip stick or by hand. It requires no special training. Your installers or finishers can do it. And applying Green Zip is really fast, which means Green Zip will not affect your budget or schedule. Now, let's show you how Green Zip works. Step 1, the installation. Whether framing with wood or metal studs, install your gypsum drywall partitions either horizontally or vertically using removable screws. Now, apply the Green Zip tape directly over the joints and screws before mudding. This is key in facilitating the demounting process, as we will soon show you. The adhesive back positions and holds the Green Zip tape in place. With all the joints now covered, apply the joint compound over the Green Zip tape. Again, no special techniques required here. Just finish as you normally would. The mud presses through the unique Green Zip design, creating an exceptionally strong bond as the mud cures. This is what makes the superior product of Green Zip so powerful. The installation is now complete. Paint and finish out accordingly. That's it. Step 2. Demount and reuse. Reveal the Green Zip tape. Pull the tape and voila! Just like that, in a matter of seconds, the paint and mud are removed, exposing the screws. Green Zip is designed to be removed in one piece. The entire joint will be exposed with one effortless pull. The rest is pretty obvious. The screws come out and the panels detach. Stack the panels for reuse when you're ready. It's just that simple, because Green Zip makes it simple. Green Zip. Remove, reuse, relocate.
All right. So, Mark, how does that help by you reusing? Because I think a lot of people just want to be, um, you know, rip and redo, right? I mean, what does it mean for the cost segregation?
Sure. What's interesting about this is that there's several different ways you can look at it. One is from an environmental standpoint. When you go ahead and use this tape, and which, by the way, is not commercially available, it's available through us through a licensing. What we do is we will supply the tape free of charge for someone. And the way in which you have a savings is that they talked about interior non-load bearing walls. Now it's a lot of words, but what it is are the walls within, not the outside structural walls, but the interior walls. Typically, you would not be able to depreciate those at all. They would be 27 and a half year or 39 year. However, with this, and we had the letter from the IRS, and this is the only one which is approved by the IRS, which makes those walls depreciable. So what happens is you may never may never change the wall, but if you ever do change it, it's more environmentally friendly because instead of all that drywall going into the landfill, you're able to reuse it. And think about like a medical facility. When you have, if you're going to be moving walls around, what a pain that would be because you had to put up all this plastic, you have all this dust, you have all this, it's very disruptive to be able to do something like that. However, with this process, you can reuse it. You don't have to go through that hassle. And so again, what it does is it reclassifies not just the drywall, but all the interior things, the plumbing, the electrical, the molding, all those different things. So we can save about $500,000 to $1 million for every $10 million for them. I had a conversation today with a client who's doing a $35 million new construction in Illinois. And we estimate, we haven't got all the figures yet, we're going to save them about $2.5 million on that project. I also have one that I'm doing in northern suburbs of Houston right now in Conroe, utilizing this, and we have a $150 million hospital, and we've got a bunch of other projects. So again, what it does is it reclassifies it. There's also something called LEED credits, which is LEED, LEED credits. And we have a lot of what it does, this provides us about an extra 17 LEED credits. So we have a lot of clients that are being able to convert from a gold to a platinum LEED by utilizing this procedure.
All right, excellent, excellent. So again, you are nationwide. You've done 50,000 studies, and lots of different services, R&D, tax studies, the Section 179D, this zip tape. There's just so many things that you guys offer. Is that typically more than what most cost seg companies do?
Yes, a lot of them will specialize in a lot of other, mostly just the cost seg, but we are really the only ones that do the green zip tape. That is a proprietary thing, and it's not something that's, again, commercially available, and it's something that we provide as well because we want to save our clients as much money as possible. The other thing I'll add to that is not just advantageous for new construction, but a lot of adaptive reuse. As you know, there's a huge glut of office in this country right now, and some clients are converting their office space into multifamily, and in order to configure those properties, they need to do a lot of interior walls. So by utilizing this green zip tape, it can be utilized for that as well.
Gotcha. Well, let's make sure everybody has your contact information, and either take a picture of that, or you'll see this later in the video. I do want to make sure that we have all of our questions answered here. I don't know,
I saw one that asked about the demo, and as far as the installation, it actually takes a little bit less time to do the installation of the green zip tape versus the traditional method.
Okay. Mark, name the land improvements: plumbing, water, electric, etc. That's Paula asked that question.
It'd be the wall, the interior walls that we're talking about, not the land for the green zip.
That was before that slide was presented, Julie.
Okay.
So choose.
Okay, good. Does anybody else have any questions in the house? What happens to the dry mud?
It just what comes off with the tape when you pull it up.
Yeah. Okay.
And then you remud it with the same tape.
Yeah. Okay.
And by the way, what happens is we license that property, so we provide that tape free of charge. It's part of the licensing deal. And then if they ever have a renovation like that, they need more tape, we'll ship it to them free.
Oh, that's great. Great.
Yeah, I have a
All right.
question.
Yes, Paula.
Yeah, so Mark, if you have a second gen property, an older property, and someone, one of our lovely renters takes a wall or two out before they leave, and you have a mixture of the old method and the new method with the green zip tape, is there a way that your company can ascertain how many panels of sheetrock that you used to the new method with the green zip tape so that you can get some benefit out of it as you do the rehab? How does that work?
We will identify what are the walls that will do that. One thing that we do, I will want to mention, is that this is best suited for properties that have a $10 million or greater. Those are the ones that we're targeting. If you're just looking at doing a small renovation on something, it's not a good fit for this. We're really going after the
So
10
what is your
million.
cutoff? You said 10 million?
Yeah, I mean, we've actually done some which are less, especially like in a medical facility, because they do have a whole lot more of the interior non-load bearing walls than most property types. So if in a case like that, them in hospitals, we could probably do something. Well, hospitals are always going to be greater than that, but some smaller medical facilities might make sense. So that's what happens is we take a look at the drawings, the structural drawings. We'll take a look at all the different thing what this construction budget's going to be, and based on that, our engineers will pour over that and they'll identify what's the estimate of the savings going to be based on that. And a lot of that has to do with not just the drawings, but how are the floor joists located? Are they going horizontally, one direction versus another, and that can have an impact as well. And sometimes we can work with the general contractor and make suggestions on what they can do during the construction process to best utilize this.
Yeah. So medical, I mean, depending on the type of room, even for sound barriers, for HIPAA, and also for X-ray, you may have a different type of sheetrock. So does that tape work on those other types of structures?
Yes. Yeah, we've got a lot of hospitals.
A lot of money. Save a lot
Great
of
questions.
Thank you.
If Mark, again, if somebody wants to get a hold of you, we've got your number 630-329-9801 or mark.gross@CSSIservices.com. Mark, thank you so much for unpacking this. I think there's a big mystery when it comes to cost segregation, and you've really unpacked this well, kind of brought it down for us to understand it. It's not like way hard to understand. So thank you for that. Appreciate it.
You're welcome. My pleasure.
And again, thank you for all that you do for us here at Zoom at 8. Appreciate it.